Hi again, Social Security and Retirement wrap-up lecture. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to make sure that you guys understood is why we make you learn about Social Security, right? So I asked the in-person class last night, well, why do you think Social Security is even important for you to know about? And a lot of the responses were based on the fact that Social Security is something that we're all doing right now. So you're paying right now out of your jobs if you're working for the Social Security benefits that are currently going out. And not only are you paying in right now, but at some point it's going to be relevant because you're going to be drawing it, and you're hoping that you'll be able to draw it. The other things that I think I want to make sure that you understand are that we will not have retirement as we know it if we don't have Social Security. These two go hand in hand. You cannot have retirement, the social construct of retirement as we know it in the US, if we don't have Social Security as we know it. If this goes away or radically changes or diminishes much more, we aren't going to have a retirement in the US, not just me, myself, or you guys individually, but as a society, we will no longer have the concept of retirement because no one will be able to afford it. Or there will be very few people who will be able to afford to retire, which is an interesting concept when you think about it. We already have a growing, aging workforce. Think about an exponential increase in older workers and what it would mean if we only had 10% of older adults who are able to retire. So it may not be to that point, but when you think about it, they're really hand in hand. If you don't have Social Security and a thriving Social Security, you can't have a thriving retirement. And that has implications for society as well as individual older adults. Retirement does a lot of good things for people who want to retire, including increased well-being, increased physical and social aspects of your life, and also the ability to contribute back to society in different ways besides jobs. But there are a lot of things that retirement does for us. So we'd like to keep it around. And that sort of trite idea for me has a reality, though. If retirement went away, think about all of the people in your life who are currently experiencing retirement or who have plans for or looking forward to it, and how that would change if they could just all continue to be in the workforce indefinitely. So what happens to Social Security and the fixes that we choose, or if we choose to continue to ignore it and kind of push it off, this is going to dramatically affect our ability to retire and our clients' and patients' abilities to retire, and the impact that'll have on people's physical and mental well-being if they continue to be, in a sense, forced to be in the workforce for a longer amount of time. One of the things that we know is important about Social Security to not only retirement is that it enables retirement for some, but it also keeps a lot of older adults out of poverty, whether they're in retirement or not. This is a major source of income. So if we look at this chart, which I've showed you before, we have about a 10% poverty rate at the federal poverty level right now. If we took away Social Security as we know it, that would quadruple. So if there are about 22 people in our class, let's say about 20. So the two of us will be in poverty under the current Social Security. About 9 of us will be in poverty if that goes away. So, all right. So that's it. I just wanted to hit home again the importance of Social Security to retirement and the implications that it has, not just as this sort of abstract government policy, but how it affects us, our lives, our families' lives, but the lives of those that we serve. And let's talk a little bit about retirement. So if we don't have retirement as we know it, which, as I mentioned before in retirement lecture, only about half of people have a traditional retirement with a capital R, right, that we know of. So you retire at 65, you get the proverbial gold watch, and you start your life of leisure. So only about half of people are doing that, and we know we have increasing amounts of older adults staying in the workforce for either reasons that they've chosen or that they are kind of forced to do for monetary reasons. So, what is retirement looking like? Well, I gave you a few options last time, right? We talked about Dolores, who is in poverty, and cannot retire, but has chosen to construct her retirement in the way that she gets to travel, but she also has to work. And it's a challenge for her. And it's a challenge for older adults who are impoverished or at that tweener line because they're still having to work. But retirement might also look a little bit more comfortable, but different for someone who is in a phased retirement or a semi-retirement or has gotten an encore job, which is what we call that sort of second career later in life. Some of those are in the shared economy or the gig economy. So this is what some of the new retirement looks like. We have a growing number of older adults who are getting into the gig economy. So labor force wise, about 7% of folks are in the gig economy, but of those 55 plus, we see about a quarter of those workers who are in the gig economy. So what is that? You read an article about it, and what that is basically it's working for yourself, but through a parent company like Uber or Lyft or different types of shared economy companies where they kind of outsource work to people, and it's sort of these loose contracts where you're unemployed but not, and you can kind of work as much as you want or as little as you want, and it's based on your own desire. So we had that article in the New York Times about the shared economy that you read, and here's a picture of one of the gentlemen that was profiled. So what he did was, because he was in a place where he couldn't really not work and he couldn't find a job in another area and needed the flexibility, he rents out his Mustang as a rental car. So that's one of the possibilities of the many types of different gig economy companies that are out there, is kind of like Airbnb for cars. So you rent out your car. And he even reported that he made $6,000 in 1 year, and that he was able to kind of recoup some more money because when he goes places, he can use his credits to rent other people's cars in the app. So that was kind of cool. Also, we see Uber had an influx of older drivers as well. And AARP, in fact, has paired with Uber in 2015 to kind of incentivize or increase the number of older adults who are comfortable in signing up as Uber drivers and able to have these encore careers that are flexible, because they may be semi-retired or retired. They kind of have more flexible schedules. They have something to do. They can make money if they need to. They can make a full-time wage or a part-time wage. It's a social connection, and it's very flexible. And I put Uber old up there in quotes because there was a great video on YouTube depicting more of an ageist spin on this, which was from Jimmy Kimmel. He made kind of a spoof commercial about Uber old and said, just think, within hours, your elderly driver will show up. And there were several other sort of ageist stereotypical comments about older drivers about that. So it's certainly not something that is free from ageism, but in the gig economy, actually, they find that it's easier for older adults to get work in that arena without discrimination, because it is such a fluid and flexible and kind of anonymous a little bit with your employer. So you can sign up, anybody can sign up and be a driver, and they don't discriminate on you based on age. They don't say, no, you can't be a driver unless you don't have a driver's license or pass some of their other basic qualifications. But for the most part, it's also easier to get jobs in the gig economy for older adults because that discrimination or ageist factor is reduced. Certainly, you had come up against ageist comments and people who are your customers, but it doesn't keep you from earning the money in a lot of ways. In the shared economy, we also have things like Vayable, which was another interesting gig economy job. So this is an example of an older woman in Racine, Wisconsin, who signed up for Vayable, and that is basically a tourism app. So you can sign up to be an employee, create your own tourism experience in your town or in an area that you're at, and sell it to people. So this is also another great example of capitalizing on the strengths of older workers because it requires flexibility for you to be available during the daytime when tourists need to do their thing. And it also helps that you to have people who have been in an area and lived there for a long time and have a lot of sort of wisdom about the area and knowledge of the different aspects of town. So it's definitely a good fit for older workers. So last night in class, I had our students discuss what are some of the key challenges that we see with retirement and this new look of retirement from a biopsychosocial cultural perspective, right? Thinking about the life course and, of course, considering ageism. And I just wanted to share with you a few of the things that they talked about. Some of the more unique things that came up are thoughts about, well, when you think about the life course, those of us who choose to have families have a very different retirement trajectory than people who don't, or they can, because of the fact that when you have a family, particularly if you're a woman, that has some major influences on your ability to save, your ability to earn, and it will definitely affect your retirement trajectory. It could make it later. It could make it more challenging for you to have the type of experience that you want. But knowing as a younger person that this is a choice that you're making, and that that pot of savings might look small when you have a mortgage and college funds to save for and medical emergencies, but that it is also a vital choice to have a family and helps with social well-being. Certainly, we talked about the ageism factor and worker discrimination and retirement, but also one interesting thing that the class came up with that we hadn't talked about before was that sort of stigma of the older worker, because if you are 65 plus and still working, there may be some stigma against you because people look at you and think, well, why aren't you retired? Didn't you save enough money? Aren't you good enough to retire? And also when we think about retirement, we think about status and the stigma maybe around having less in retirement or having more, being able to take vacations or not, and what kind of, cars and boats and all kinds of things that you can accrue in retirement. And those types of things are still important and affect your sense of well-being and your identity in retirement. Also, some of the interesting things that they came up with for themselves were thinking about the barriers to savings and the cultural differences in cohorts. When you think about maybe millennials or Gen Zers for you guys, and the culture around saving money and working and debt and student debt as well, when you think about the fact that you guys will come in with a considerable more amount of student debt than the generations who are currently retired, because of the fact that more of you are in college for longer and it's costing more, that's going to impact your retirement. So just some interesting things to think about when we think about this new retirement. And lastly, I just want to sum up by saying this is a very unique experience. It's a social construct of retirement, and it's changing. It's going to change even more once you get there, because we'll have more people going through it. Well, Social Security will be changing. Our financial stability will be changing. The characteristics that you guys come in with culturally will affect how you do retirement. But already less than half of retirees do it the traditional way, more doing reentry or encore jobs, more staying in the workforce, and some are doing that traditional thing. But I do want to tell you that the traditional retirement might not be all it's cracked up to be. I was telling them last night, retirement isn't necessarily a negative event, but it is what you make it. Even if you do get to retire at 65, get the gold watch, then when they did a survey in the late 90s, about how people use their leisure time, now that you have all this time to be able to volunteer and contribute and do all these meaningful things, what they found was the majority of people spend at least half or more of their time just sitting around and watching TV, which is a very sad commentary on retirement, right? So those people who are traditionally retiring, this life of leisure, of travel, of excitement, of seeing your family, of all these things, really just turned out to be lots more time to sit around and watch TV. Which, when we think about it from a biopsychosocial perspective, that's more time that you're sedentary, more time, and sedentariness affects your physical health. That's a lack of social connection if you're just sitting there watching TV, and can have psychological implications for you if you're not able to do those meaningful activities and contribute. So just a word of caution as you think about the golden days of the ability to traditionally retire, that maybe that having a new retirement is a good thing, and the ability to make retirement something that you want it to be needs to be flexible and adaptable. And the last thing I want to say about this is from the perspective of a gerontologist, where you'll be dealing with older adults who are making this transition, who are unable to make the transition in ways that they thought they were, or maybe making it earlier or later than they thought. But the bottom line here is that as professionals, we need to understand that retirement is an option for everyone. It just will look wildly different for some people. But retirement, your goals for retirement can happen in some way. They may not look like they did. You may have economic forces that that are out of your control, that affected it. But the point is that we can help negotiate or help our older clients have the experiences that they want in retirement, regardless of your income level, regardless of how much you save, regardless if you're working or not. There are positive aspects to retirement, and that needs to be a message as well for the new retirement. All right, so that's the wrap up for that, and I will see you guys next week.